Great. Well, as people come in, I can at least start the intro. So welcome, everyone on this cold, snowy evening. My name is Matt Schumann. I'm a programming librarian here at Cary. Before we begin, please let me know if you're experiencing any technical issues. You can message me in the chat. If you have any questions for our speaker tonight, please use the Q&A button or the raise hand function. Sorry, I just lost my... Lastly, this program is made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. With us this evening is Bill Gette, taking us on another virtual adventure. This is part one of a two-part series on Costa Rica. So Bill will be back on next Monday, January 22nd for part two. Bill is the former sanctuary director of Joppa Flats Education Center in Newburyport and the past president of the Friends of the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. He's led expeditions across the world on all 7 continents. So now, please welcome Bill Gette.
Well, thank you, Matt, very much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're in the Lexington area, I wonder if you're as cold and sort of ugly day as it is here in Newburyport, where I am. And so, well, welcome. As we go through, if you have any questions, if I haven't made something clear to you, I hope that you'll put something in the chat line so we can address it. And at the end, if you have been to Costa Rica, maybe you can share some of your experiences at the very end. Costa Rica is one of those very, very special places. I've been there 8 or 10 times and have had just extraordinary experiences there. And so I hope you enjoy as we go through the talk. Again, if you've been there, I hope it brings back happy memories. And if you haven't been to Costa Rica, I think this should be put on your list of places to go. One of the beautiful things about going to Costa Rica, it's like flying to Los Angeles or San Francisco. It's really easy. So instead of flying basically from Massachusetts to Texas and then to California, you go from here to Miami and then down to Costa Rica. And usually you come back via say Dallas, Fort Worth. So it's a very, very easy trip. The infrastructure is really good. They have excellent services. If you're going to a lodge, they can pick you up at the airport. So it should be a low stress opportunity for you. The Costa Rican flag, and if you go to Costa Rica, there's some terms that are helpful to know about. One is you'll hear tica or tico. You'll hear an expression that means either tico is a man or tica is a woman, and it's an affection reference to themselves. And some people in other parts of Central America call the Costa Ricans ticos or ticas, okay? Because there's some habit or whatever of the Costa Ricans very often using the word tico for meaning small at the end of words. Okay, and that's where that comes from. Something you'll see on signs, and everybody says it, Pura Vida. It's basically the pure life. It's an affectionate greeting among guests. It means fabulous or great, hello, and very often they'll welcome you. You're welcome, Pura Vida. So just something to be aware of. And mucho gusto. Okay, this is something you hear all the time. It's if you hold the door for somebody, mucho gusto. Okay, it's something, thank you very much, or it often means nice to meet you. So just some of these terms that are, I don't know, it's just fun. It just adds something. At least is my approach to folks down there. So if you go to Costa Rica, be aware of those things and don't be at all afraid of saying mucho gusto or something. Okay. So I always like to put in the faces of Costa Rica. These are certainly the wildlife images of Costa Rica. You'll be seeing these birds again as we go through the presentation, but the upper left-hand corner is a rufous-napped wren. Talk about more. Then the bat, little mammal. This is a leaf-cutting bat, okay, or umbrella bat is another name for it. That fabulous bird in the upper right-hand corner, that's a boat-billed heron. We'll talk about its behavior and so forth as we go on. And bottom left is a western spiny-tailed iguana. One in the middle is one of those very often hard to see birds, but this is Great Curassow. This is a male. Think of it as turkey size, American wild turkey size. And then the brown-throated three-toed sloth. So these are just some of the pretty faces that you'll see there. If you're not familiar with Costa Rica, it's used to be part of the Spanish Empire. It used to be a province of Nicaragua a long time ago, but it's independent, obviously, right now, and that's where it's located. And so just its close neighbors are Nicaragua to the north and Panama to basically to the south and to the east. And the capital city is San Jose, Costa Rica. And that's where the major airport, there are a number of airports in the country, one way up in the northwest portion of the country. And the major airport is there at San Jose. It's not actually in San Jose, but that's what the destination is. And so that's where it is. And I think it's always interesting to see how tiny this country is compared to the United States. And they have as many bird species in Costa Rica as we do combined in Canada and the United States. We can talk about that sometime later on, especially in our second session on Monday. But that's how big it is. So basically, it has the same land area as West Virginia. So you can see how it's compared to New Jersey. So this is a two-part lecture. This is in terms of the overall itinerary that we did. It was a part of the Pacific Lowlands. So that starts in Alajuela, which is the place where most of the hotels are outside of San Jose, Alajuela. And that's Villa San Ignacio. That's where we stayed for 2 nights. And then we'll go to the Tárcoles River. That's number 2. We'll take a boat trip out there. Then number 3 is the Macaw Lodge and Private Reserve, a fabulous place, which I'd highly recommend anybody go to. That's a spectacular place. And in a lot of the cases, you don't have to take a major trip with people. You can book with some of these lodges, and they'll pick you up at the airport and take you there. So you don't have to commit to a multi-day trip. And then Esquinas Rainforest Lodge, which is way down in the southwestern part of the country. Okay, then the second part of the itinerary with the very, very different conditions is the Central Highlands portion of the itinerary. And so Las Cruces Biological Station and the Wilson Botanical Garden down, it's literally within a couple miles of the Panamanian border. And then the number 2 is the Sabagre Hotel and Nature Reserve, which is another one of these spectacular places where you can book rooms there, you can fly into San Jose, and they will come and pick you up and take you, and it's certainly worth multiple days. But the Las Cruces and Sabagre Mountain Lodge we'll talk about on Monday. Really important, Costa Rica is a tiny place, but has amazing diversity of habitats and wildlife. And this is the topography of the country. And I've highlighted the 3 major places that I stayed on my trip. So it's the Central Valley. That's where San Jose and Alajuela are. Then the Macaw Lodge and Private Reserve. That's at number 2. And Esquinas, again, way in the south. But just look at the elevations here. In terms of the Central Valley, it's about 3,000 feet above sea level. And you go down to the Macaw River, Macaw Lodge, and that's at about 1,000 feet. The Tárcoles River, which I'll take you on a virtual boat trip, almost at sea level. And then Esquinas Lodge is like 300 feet above sea level. So we're talking about really lowland areas. And just if you notice on the map, notice that white area in the middle. Well, those are areas that are, 3,000 meters or 9,800 feet high. So here is this wall of mountains that's separating the Caribbean slope, that's on the right-hand side or eastern side of the country, from the Pacific slope on the western side. So you go from sea level to the highest point, I think, is 10,300 feet. So, and we're talking about the country at the narrowest point is just about 90 miles across. So we're not talking about much, but just think of all the different changes in habitat type you can go through, going from sea level up to 10,000 feet. Okay. Now, rainfall is a really big deal down here. Now, I think Boston, I think we get 40 inches of rain a year. Okay, but if you notice the Central Valley, that number one again, it's getting somewhere around 79 to 118 inches of rain. That's quite a bit of rain. We go down to then the Macaw Lodge, and it's right at the edge of the area that gets between 151 and 197 inches of rain. Go all the way down south to Esquinas Lodge, number 3, and notice it's right in that darkest blue. They're getting between 197 and 236 inches of rain a year. So when they call it Rainforest Lodge, they're serious. I mean, it's definitely lots and lots of rain. So elevation and the amount of rainfall, especially along the Caribbean and the Pacific Slope, is critically important. If you look sort of in the middle of the map, notice there's Cartago. That's one of their major cities, one of the 2 major cities in the country. There's a huge area of intense rainfall. Okay, so we're going to start off our adventure today, starting off at a hotel, which was perfectly adequate. It took about, say, 45 minutes to get from the airport it's actually in Heredia, but over to Alajuela. And it's not very far, but city life in parts of San Jose are really quite crowded. Okay, so it takes a while there, but when you get there, this is one of the really beautiful places to stay, Villa San Ignacio, which is a restaurant and a hotel lodging. We stayed there. I actually went down a day early, so I make sure I was rested. But the trip that I went, by the way, I went with the Rhodes Scholar as a participant. And so this is a restaurant and the pool. And so you get these nice accommodations. And just right around these hotels, if it's a tourist hotel, they have to have bird feeders, okay, because they know how important birds are for many of their tourists. So this is this Rufous-tailed wren. We saw this, just a headshot of it before. So if you're familiar with our Carolina wrens or house wrens, this is much bigger. This is much more the size of, say, a cactus wren that we have out in the southwestern part of the United States. But just a beautiful bird that's coming in for seeds and raisins, and they love bananas and papaya and any kind of fruit they'll come into. But notice the red-like, distinctly down-curved bill that they have. Well, I think this is a well-named bird, Rufous-tailed wren. Okay. And one of the beautiful things when you go to the New World tropics, so whether that's Panama or Costa Rica or Honduras, what you see is they have lots and lots of tanagers. Now in North America, we don't have very many. We have summer tanager, western tanager, hepatic tanager, scarlet tanager, but they have dozens of tanagers when we have a few. This to me is one of the most beautiful. It's sort of this grayish blue and the bright blue, especially at the carpal joint. The carpal joint is where the wing bends, that really beautiful blue color, and it's coming in and eating. Well, they also have watermelon out here, but eating bananas. These feeding stations, because they're well established, that you don't bother birds. As long as you stay back, say 20 feet from the feeder, that's usually enough for them to come in without any problem. Inca dove. This is a dove that we get in South Texas and southern parts of New Mexico and Arizona, but it's relatively common. A small dove, smaller than our mourning dove, but has these really beautiful scaling on the feathers. Notice a really beautiful dark eye. Now this is clay-colored thrush, and this is always something that has interested me. When they have all these amazing, they have toucans and quetzals and the amazingly colored tanagers and everything, but the clay-colored thrush, which by the way we get in southernmost Texas occasionally, this is a national bird of Costa Rica. And I know, having led trips to Costa Rica a lot of time, people say, well, why that bird? Okay. I mean, it's not really colorful or distinctive in any way. Its behavior is very, very similar to that of our American robin. But why this bird? Why did the people vote for this one? Well, it has to do with at the time that they were getting a national bird together, Costa Rica was agrarian. They're farmers. That's what they were. But the clay-colored thrush begins to sing, and sings beautifully, by the way, at the start of the planting season. So this is something that the agrarian society really had a connection with, between their agrarian lifestyle and the bird that was singing at the start of that. Handsome bird. Okay. Then, of course, there are lots of insects that are really beautiful that we don't get here. This is apricot sulfur. I think really distinctive. Smaller than our monarch butterfly. It's about the same size as our cabbage white, if you're familiar with that. Now, banded peacock is very common, and I've seen these in Trinidad, Honduras, Belize, Panama, so forth. So this is one that's really widespread throughout Middle America. Really handsome. Size, shape of our red admiral butterfly, if you're familiar with that. And then these skipper-like butterflies. This is yellow-tipped flasher coming in to get nectar from the plant here. This is relatively small. And then when you're fortunate enough, you can come across these referred to as rhinoceros beetles, because it looks like a rhinoceros, okay? And this beetle was about 2 inches long, okay? And notice a very distinct horn on the front. And if you go back to dinosaur days, this looks like Triceratops with the horn and the two on the top. Anyway, so this is one of those, this is in the adult phase of its lifetime. Talk about a beautiful web. And this spider, if you just took the right-hand side, from the tip of the upper leg to the tip of the lower leg, was 4 inches. So we're talking about a sizable spider. This is golden silk spider. It's a pretty good reason why it's called that, because the silk is definitely golden colored. And these big spiders, not only do they catch insects, but occasionally they'll also catch hummingbirds. That's how big and powerful these spiders are. Okay. Okay, we had an orientation in the morning, and then we're off to the Tárcoles River. This is the river that, well, San Jose, Heredia, Alajuela are in the Central Valley. And this is the river, the Tárcoles River is the one that empties that watershed into basically into the Pacific Ocean eventually. So we have scheduled a boat trip on the Tárcoles River. And so this is what it looks like, and lots of vegetation. So as we're cruising down here, we're looking for any shorebirds that might be along the side of the right of way of the river here, anything that would be perched up in the trees. And it's really nice because you get out into the river like this, you don't find very many other boats. It's quiet and calm. And so you can observe things very, very well and take reasonably good photographs. So going along here, but this is one American crocodile. You don't want to mess with this thing, okay? This was about 14 feet long, big animal, okay? And some people think, oh, we'll just go over and take a quick look. Alligators and crocodiles in the first 20 or 25 feet are a lot faster than you are, okay? So always be aware of that. Not that, and you definitely don't want to get involved with this. So they love to come out on the mud in this case and get some good heat from the sun, keep warm themselves. Okay, this is osprey. Some people refer to them as fishhawks, osprey. This is a bird that in North America, we almost lost. The numbers were very much depressed because of the use of DDT and other chemicals in the water. They eat the fish, and of course the fish would store the DDT that they absorbed through the water and so forth. And so both ospreys and peregrine falcons and bald eagles were really suffering Fortunately, they made a major comeback. So there are some ospreys that are permanent residents in Costa Rica, but many of these are North American migrants that have moved out of our area down to Middle America during our winter. I just think, look at those talons. You think if this, by the way, this bird will hover over the water and then dive feet first into the water to catch the fish with those talons that you see. So it's a tough one. And then notice the distinctly hooked bill for ripping the fish apart. So that's you want to some of the breeding and sometimes wintering shorebird. This is Wilson's plover, which is a breeding bird all the way up into southernmost New Jersey, but they are permanent residents in portions of Costa Rica, and of course, a lot of our birds will migrate down to Costa Rica during the winter. Wilson's plover, it's known because of that very, very heavy bill that it has. Another plover that was overwintering is this one. This is semi-palmated plover. This is a bird that breeds across northern Canada and into Alaska, and then migrates down through Massachusetts. We don't have them here in the winter at all. They all move through our area down to the Texas Gulf Coast and along the middle America, along Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica. And if you're wondering what the name semi-palmated it means, well, if you look at your fingers, you have a tiny bit of little web between your fingers. That's what these have. So it doesn't have a web foot like a duck, but between the toes, 3 toes forward, 1 back, has a tiny bit of webbing, and that's what that. So it's a ridiculous, is absolutely useless field mark because you'll never see it. Their feet are always in the mud like this, but that's where that name comes from. Okay, willet. This is a breeding bird here in Massachusetts, all the way up into Nova Scotia and Cape Cod, all along the eastern seaboard. But of course, during the wintertime, they're not here. This is a really gray one. This is probably a bird that was the willets, so the subspecies of willets of the western part of the United States and the prairie province of Canada. Okay. Along the edge of the river in the shallow water, you have these black-necked stilts. This is a bird that we get in the southern part of the United States and in the prairies during breeding time. Those marvelous long legs, so it can wade deep out into the water where other shorebirds can't get to the prey. And then they're just picking aquatic or in some cases marine invertebrates out of the water column. Really handsome. And snowy egret, this is a bird that nests here in New England now in the summertime. We don't have them at all now. They're all somewhere down Texas Gulf Coast or in South America. And roseate spoonbills, which we get in Florida and along the Texas Gulf Coast. There's the one on the left-hand side. This is the mature one, okay? The one on the right-hand side is not nearly as pink. It's an immature one. You can see a number of things about the one on the right. First of all, it does not have the beautiful orangey eye that the adult has, and it doesn't have that yellowish wash that you see between the eye and the base of the bill. So this is a young one, but it's full grown. Okay. And wood storks we get in the southern part of Florida along the Texas Gulf Coast. This is a really rather common bird in New World tropics. And this is one that was feeding along the edge of the bank. It was looking for crabs or feeding on crabs that were in among the mangroves here. And white ibis, the adult white ibises are white. This is an immature one. So if you're a beginning bird watcher and you see this bird, it doesn't really look like a white ibis, not completely white, but give it another season and it will be white. This is the immature. The distinctly down curved bill, it probes in the mud for crabs and things of that nature, other worms, and will walk through fields looking for grasshoppers and crickets and things of that nature. Now this is, I think, one of my favorite birds of all, okay? And this is an extraordinary, we had an extraordinary opportunity to photograph this, but this is boat-billed heron. This is a nocturnal feeding heron. Notice the bill. Okay, the bill is very soft and flexible, and it's very sensitive. So at nighttime, notice the big eyes too. So it will, in nighttime, it will walk around in shallow water using its bill and probing in the mud, looking for whatever's there, bivalves and worms and things of that nature. But usually, when you see boat-billed herons, they're underneath the vegetation where it's really dark, where you really can't see them very well or get a particularly good photograph. But I thought this guy was most generous by sitting there. And you can really see that eye and that flat bill that it has. If you're familiar with night herons, this is about the same size as our black-crowned night heron. Okay, a hawk of the wet areas, marshes, along river courses and things like, is this one common black hawk? This is the one that's common on the Pacific side of the country. There's also a mangrove black hawk, but that's on the Caribbean slope. So it's just sitting up there. It's looking for reptiles, amphibians, things like that, that would be along in this case, along the Tárcoles River. So in terms of the size, about the same size as our red-tailed hawk, which is our common hawk here in Massachusetts. And then in Inga, okay, we get these in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, places like this. Has a number of different names. It's Anhinga is its proper name, but water turkey is another one because its tail looks somewhat like a tail of a male wild turkey when it fans it. So water turkey and snakebird, another name for it, because it has bladders, swim bladders within its body. And if it empties those bladders of air, it sinks in the water like a submarine. And sometimes all you see is the head sticking out of water. It looks like a snake standing on top of the water. That's the male, and this is the female. So if you're familiar with cormorants, this is about the same size as our double-crested cormorant. And then frigate birds, birds of the ocean. These are typically pelagic birds. This is a seabird that if it gets in the waters is in real trouble because they can't swim. They really can't take off from the water. So if they ever go into the water, they're in trouble. But what they do is they fly along. They locate a school fairly high. They'll locate a school of fish, and then they'll fly very low across the water, and they'll grab fish from within the school as they fly over. The other thing, they can be a kleptoparasite also, which means if they see a gull that's caught a fish or something like that, they will go down and they will try to steal it from the gull or the tern or whatever they're saying. Okay. This is the magnificent frigate bird also. Now, as we were going up along the Tárcoles River, I saw this laughing falcon. It gets its name because its call sort of sounds like someone laughing. Okay, it loves to eat reptiles, so lizards and snakes and things of that nature. So it's about the same size if you're familiar with our merlin or something. It's a little bit bigger than that. Okay, and turkey vultures are just everywhere. In this case, what this bird is doing, it was in the morning time, I photographed this, and what's doing is opening up its wings to the solar radiation to help it dry out underneath its wings and get rid of any algae or parasites that might be in its feathers. And this is a bird that finds its prey by smelling, okay? So they'll circle over an area smelling for a decaying animal, and then that's how they find it. The black vulture finds its prey, the dead animals it feeds on, by sight. So very often you'll see mixed flocks of these here. The black vulture used to be only in the southern part of the United States. Now they're now nesting here in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So a major range expansion for this bird. Okay. And groove-billed Annie. We get Annies in the southern part of Texas and in southernmost Florida. This is groove-billed. This is really interesting. This is not a passeriform, a songbird. It's related to songbirds. It's related to woodpeckers. So we have half the birds in the world are called passeriforms based on the structure of their feet and tendons behind the ankle and things of that nature. But this is not exactly a passeriform, but it's pretty close. But interesting thing, it's zygodactyl feet. It has where most the passenger forms have 3 toes forward and 1 back. This one has 2 toes forward and 2 toes back. And really interesting, it's life history. They usually travel together in groups of either one pair or up to 5 pairs in a communal group. And then you'll see them, if you don't usually see one, you'll see a group of them. And you notice the grooves, by the way, on the bill. And what they do is this group of 1 to 5 pairs, mating pairs, they defend a common territory. They build a communal nest, and they all take turns in terms of incubating the eggs and caring for the young. It's just interesting life histories for these anis. When we came off the boat, we happened to go to a woodland, and there was a black and white owl. So hard to get a particularly good photograph because the glare of the leaves and everything, but get a representation. Okay, from the Tárcoles River, we went up to Macaw Lodge. Now, this place is just wonderful. It's 1,000 feet above sea level. And this is the entry road into the place. You're in the country, and there's the lodge with the dining room and the kitchens and offices are on the ground floor where you see the people, and the upper level is where the rooms are. Very nice. I tend to get up early and I go out when I can barely see. So I'm out here photographing and seeing things, and most people are having their coffee. But right in front of the lodge is this really interesting pond, which ponds are good. This is a snail kite. This is an immature snail kite. And notice the distinctly hooked bill it has. Well, it feeds on snails, lemon snails. We get them in southernmost Florida, and they feed on snails there. And they're really, that is about all they eat. But this was a really good example of that hawk, and it hung around the lodge where we could photograph it. This is a wood-rail, okay? This is Gray-cowled Wood-rail. Boy, talk about colors, okay? Notice the beautiful eye and the yellow bill. So it's walking along the edge of this little pond, and it's looking for any insects it might see, looking for tadpoles and frogs, worms, whatever it can find. And this is the size of a relatively large chicken. Okay, so it's not a tiny. We have rails, and we don't have wood rails. We have just rails, and this is as big or bigger than our salt marsh rails. Okay, clapper rail, for example. Okay. Here's another really beautiful. This is a tiger heron. So it's not a heron exactly. It's a tiger heron. And you'll see that a lot in names of neotropical birds where it's not really a heron, but they put some modifier in front of it it's sort of like a heron, but it's in taxonomy. Its relationship is not that of a heron. But beautiful. Look at the vermiculations on the throat and chest. Here's an ibis. We get glossy ibis up our way, and certainly very common in the southeastern part of the United States. This is the green ibis, and I guess it sort of looks green. Anyway, I'm walking along a stick. So if you're familiar with glossy ibis, or white ibis, this is the same size. A little chunkier. Yeah. Kingfishers are amazing birds. This is green kingfisher, relatively small kingfisher. But talk about a beak on a bird. And this bird definitely has a beak, which is good. So it will either sit on a perch. Typically, this one, green kingfisher, will sit on a stick that's over a pond or something, and it's looking for small frogs or tadpoles or small fishes, and it'll usually sit up on the branch and then dive right in the water head first after the fish. Occasionally, this one will hover and then dive, but usually you'll see it. And sometimes it can be difficult to see because if you have vegetation that's overhanging a pond, something like that, they'll be underneath the vegetation where it's hard to see, but where they can see the minnows and the fishes and things like that in the water. This is the tiniest one. This is American pygmy. We get these occasionally in the southern part of the United States, very small numbers, but really colorful. And just walking around through the grounds here really the plantings here. This is one of those places that I think you could go there and you could just go there for several days and just enjoy the garden. And they have all kinds of trails that we never had time to do, but it would be worth going to have a visit. It's looking again, all these plantings, just amazing plantings looking back towards the lodge. Okay, water lilies, these various different colored water lilies. It's just, and they have gardens or forests of heliconias, like this one is. Or this one, this is hanging lobster claw, heliconia. And there are certain hummingbirds have bills that are perfectly shaped, just like these, so they could hook their bill into those flowers to get at the nectar inside. Beautiful. And ginger, there are a number of different types of ginger. I've seen those when they get really ripe. Past that, then the birds will come and eat it. Okay.
Is that the same ginger like that we eat?
I'm sorry, Matt, I hear you.
Is that the same ginger that we eat? Like, is there a root?
Oh,
like
no,
lock
no,
in
this
it?
is, no, thank you for asking the question. No, it just has that name. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
thank you. This is a plant which is well named. This is hot lips. Now, usually I see them as just relatively small plants that are, 12 to 16 inches tall, but this was on a big shrub. And I think that's just a really beautiful, well-named flower. Okay. Now, at the time of year I went, which was in November, there weren't many orchids, but this one was in blossom. This is a bamboo orchid. So the orchid was about 4 inches across in terms of its measurement. And then here on this, at the Macaw Lodge, they made their own chocolate. And so I'm a big fan of chocolate. So these cacao pods is where the seeds come from which they extract the chocolate. So you can see in the left-hand image, a lot of these pods are not ripe yet, but the ones that you see here on the right-hand side are. Okay. The big feature of the New World tropics are strangler figs. Now you see the white stalk and then you see the gray stalk or grayish brown stalk is a palm tree. And what happens with strangler figs, birds will eat the seeds of a strangler fig, the fruits of a strangler fig, and they will fly, whatever, and either they defecate the seed or the seeds are somewhat sticky. So what the birds will do, they will, in order to get rid of the seeds, they'll rub their bill against whatever they're sitting on. And then that seed germinates up in the top of the tree and grows down to the ground. When it gets down to the ground, it roots and then starts going back up again. So what you're seeing is, this is a tree, the strangler fig, the light colored thing, is strangling the tree it's on. And so it will grow up, back up into the canopy. It puts its leaves out on top of the host tree, kills off the host tree, and that's the end of it. Strangler fig, fascinating. Just look at the complex structure of that strangler fig. So's jays. We get brown jays in the southernmost part of Texas, but and in Belize they call these biambiams from their call. Black striped sparrow, size of our song sparrows or white-throated sparrows that might be coming to your feeder now. And hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are a big deal. Hummingbirds are unique to the Western Hemisphere. There are no hummingbirds in Asia or in Africa. This is unique to it. Now they have birds like honey creepers that do basically the same thing, but hummingbirds are unique to the Western Hemisphere. This is white-necked Jacobin. This is a female. You can see her tongue sticking out there. So then they probe their bill into a flower, then they stick their tongue out in order to get the nectar that's inside. This is a male. So you can see why it's called white-necked Jacobin. Beautiful iridescent bluish purple, purplish blue, and white and green. Same size as our ruby-throated hummingbird, which is by far our most common one in the eastern part of the United States. This is Chachalaca, so sort of think of it like sort of pheasant-like, okay? And they'll get their name because their call is sort of chachalac, And in the morning time, there'll be family groups of these things. And one group will start going chachalaca, 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 and then they'll go silent. And then another family group a distance away will take up the chorus. And it can be really fun. And this is what it looks up. This is a close-up. Anyway, sort of a handsome little beast. Okay. Then hummingbirds are coming back to hummingbird. This is Rufous-tailed Hummingbird. That's where its rufous tail is. And I just put this image to show all the feathers and the iridescence of those feathers on the head. A really common bird, and part of the reason it's called social flycatchers, they're really common around people's homes and things like that. It's a relatively small one. And great kiskadee. We get great kiskadees in southern Arizona and southern New Mexico and southern Texas. And it's another namesayer. Okay, it gets its name because its song is kiskadee, dee, kiskadee. Okay, we have a lot of flycatcher. This is a kingbird. This is tropical kingbird. And it looks like some of our western kingbirds, but a key field marker, if you look at the end of the tail, you can see it's distinctly notched on this bird. That's a really good field marker. Very, very common bird throughout Central America. And house wren, the same wren that we have here, different subspecies, but the same wren. And it's a tyreth, sort of behaves like a cedar waxwing. It eats fruits, things of that nature. Boat-billed flycatcher. And along roadsides and open fields, this is a roadside hawk. Think of it, same type of behavior as a red-tailed hawk. Squirrel cuckoo, it gets its name, not because it looks like a squirrel, but when it gets up in a tree, it runs along branches through the vegetation like a squirrel does. That's why it gets it's really a big cuckoo. It's about bigger, a little bit bigger, I think, than a blue jay with a proportionally longer tail. And Macaw Lodge, they were noted for their scarlet macaws, which has been an endangered species that's really been getting a lot of conservation attention. So as we drove in, we saw these scarlet macaws. Yeah. Driving down the road, we had this crested guan, just at first just the head, and then the whole bird. So think of it again, the size, almost the size of a turkey. Broad-winged hawks are very, very common in Northern America, throughout Canada, all across the northern United States. I mean, everywhere. But in the winter, every one leaves North America and goes to South America and Central America. So we have none of them in the United States during the wintertime. Okay. So from there, then we drove down along the coast, along the Pacific coast, to Esquinas Rainforest Lodge. We stopped at a couple places along some agricultural fields. This is southern lapwing. It basically does what our killdeer does in the United States. But this bird is bigger, proportionally longer legs, and they're usually in groups. So lapwing, stopped at a restaurant, and here western spiny-tailed iguanas. This is about 4.5 feet long. Okay. So I guess it's beautiful. And we were very fortunate. We saw very few mammals. A lot of people think, well, you're going to go to Costa Rica, you can see lots and lots of mammals. You see squirrels and things like that. But this is a brown-throated, three-toed sloth. And sitting up in a tree, they move very, very slowly. But the way you can tell it, there's a brown-throated, three-toed sloth, and there's a two-toed sloth. But it only matters if you count the forelimbs. How many toes are there on the front legs? Okay, one of them has 3, one of them has 2. Okay. And some butterfly. This is a queen. Okay. And white peacock. Just so many different beautiful insects. So this is the entrance road into Esquinas Lodge. So that we're talking about just almost at sea level. As you can see, it's raining. I showed you the rainfall map earlier on. They get so much rain here. Okay, you really have to count on that for at least an hour every single day, or at least more. You're going to have rain. So if someone says, make sure you bring a raincoat, things like that, slicker, something like that, make sure you do it. Okay, you'll need it. If nothing else, to protect your optics or camera. Okay, so this is the dining area and the lounge area and the meeting place of Esquinas Lodge. As you can see, we're only 230 feet above sea level. Beautiful accommodations here. And so this is a common basilisk lizard. This is a common lizard throughout Central America. This is the male. And there's another folk name for this is Jesus Christ lizard, because what they can do is they can run so fast that they can actually run across the surface of water and get to the other side. No, they can't run, 100 yards across it, but across small streams and things like that, the surface tension is just enough that if they get a good running start, they can run right across a small stream or small pond to get away from a predator. And here's the female. If you don't like snakes, you can look away for a moment, but this is a ebony keelback snake. I actually was walking along a trail and I looked down on the pond and I thought that was a hose. I thought it was a garden hose. Well, the hoses don't generally move by themselves, so I figured out that this probably was a snake. But this is a well, it is a poisonous snake, but not deadly poisonous, but you don't mess with them anyway. Okay. The little pond right in front of that reception and cafeteria area and so forth, with the lodging in the background. In that pond, you have these beautiful common water hyacinths that you have here. And hiding under the lily pads was this spectacled caiman. So like an alligator, like a crocodile. And then here it is swimming away. Okay. So if you're a fish or a turtle or something like that, you need to be very much aware of this character. It was about 5 feet long. Okay. One of the mammals that we did see was this one, Central American agouti. It has a really, to me, fairly strange bite shape with its rear end being so much higher than the forelimbs. But it's a rodent. It eats grass and fruit. Whenever the places put out fruit like bananas or things like that, you'll always get agoutis coming in to see. Here's a very close relative to our raccoon. This is Coati or Coatimundi. And this is these are plantains that they put out, like bananas. We only saw one of these during our time. A really wonderful surprise for us was these Great Curassows. This is a almost turkey size, not quite, but almost. This is a bird that is in protected areas is doing okay, but outside of protected areas, they are being shot for food and things of that nature. This is the female. And with her young one, notice her young one's plumage is almost the same as hers. And here is a male and a female. They seem to be very happy to see each other. Okay? So this is the female on the left and the male on the right. Great Curassow. Black-striped sparrow, handsome bird, and white-tipped dove. A lot of different types of doves in Central America. It gets its name white-tipped. If you look at the end of its tail, it has tiny little tips of white. I mean, it's you wouldn't say, wow, isn't that a white-tipped dove? I mean, it looks like a dove that happens to have some white tips. In any case, yellow-throated toucan. This is, of course, one of those birds that people who are going from North America down to Central America really want to see are these toucans. That big bill that you see here is used for grabbing fruit. Okay, they eat a lot of berries and things of that nature. It's also used for reaching into nesting cavities, so these birds will eat the eggs of other birds, the young of other birds. So this is a really handsome bird. This is a Scarlet-rumped Tanager. Okay, she doesn't look like she has much of a scarlet rump, but this is the female and there's the male with this really distinct scarlet rump. And if you've been to Costa Rica in the past, by the way, they're changing a lot of these names. Okay, this used to be Cherry's Tanager, but scarlet rump. Okay, showed you briefly the face of this tent-making bat. What they do is there was actually 6 bats underneath this leaf. What they'll do very often is they'll get under a palm or palmetto, and they will bite along the palmetto. So instead of the leaf being held out along the central rib, it sort of folds down, and that's where they crawl underneath to stay out of the sight of predators and protected from the rain and so forth like that. So during the daytime, as long as you move slowly, you can get some really good images of these animals. So right around Esquinas Lodge, there's this farmland, very, very wet, lots of cows, cattle egrets. This cattle egret, by the way, I think it was in 1940s, mid-1940s, that the first cattle egrets were ever seen in the Western Hemisphere. They came from Africa. And how they got to South America, nobody's sure. But now are they not only in all across South America, Central America, they're now breeding in Massachusetts. Okay, so this is, talk about 75 years of the change in this bird.
Is there?
This is Jacana. Yes.
Just about the last one where it says Western cattle egret. Does it have anything to do with cattle?
Yes, because typically they feed in, thank you, Matt. Yes, they typically feed in the fields like this one. They're waiting for this cow as it moves through the grass. Now, originally there weren't cattle. So these animals, these cattle egrets were around zebras and topis and, big, large mammals in Africa. But here they have adopted we have cows, and that sort of looks like a zebra. And it's doing what a zebra does. It's stirring up the insects and grasshoppers and things that are around in the ground. And they walk in among the cattle. And when any small grasshopper or something tries to fly away from the cow, they'll grab it. Okay, so this is what happens to be in its breeding plumage. Notice back here, the bill is sort of yellow, and here it's orange and yellow. Okay. Jacana, okay. You would think in Spanish this would be Jacana, but it's actually a Portuguese name, so it's Jacana. And this is a bird of wetland areas. This is just one for folks who have been doing a lot of birding. This is a hard bird to find. This is a plain-breasted spine-tail. You look at the tail; that's really a pretty ratty looking tail, but that's what this bird gets. That's the type of tail it gets. So it's usually found in wet, weedy fields, which is exactly where we were. Then smooth-billed ani. Okay, we've had the groove-billed ani before. Again, they go in groups, so you'll see them in nice group. The groove-billed ani is far the northern part of Costa Rica, and the smooth-billed ani in the southern part. Talk about a beak. This is large-beaked seedfinch. Variable seed ear. This is about the same size as our chickadee. Okay, it feeds on the ground. Notice his bill is all covered with seeds. And it gets its name variable seed ear because even though they're the same species, the population on the Pacific coast looks like this one, and the ones on the Caribbean slope look very different, but they interbreed with each other. This happens to be a crested caracara, which is a national bird of Mexico. Okay, so it goes through the field. It eats carrion, dead stuff. It eats large insects, snakes, rodents, bird eggs, whatever. It's a really good predator. Okay, and I'm just finishing up the show with this one. This is sensitive plant. I find these. I've seen this in Trinidad and throughout Central America. This is sensitive plant, and they respond to touch. So here is the plant as I saw it. And then I'm going to just show you here are the two leaves, okay? Composite leaves. And then I touched them. And within 2 seconds, it was like that. Talk about plants responding immediately to stimulus around them. Okay, Matt, well, that is the portion of the Caribbean slope. On Monday, we'll go up starting at Las Cruces at about 3,300 feet and go all the way up to 10,000 feet in the central highlands of the country. And if there are any questions, I'd love to take them. Or if there's somebody who would like to share an observation from a trip, that would be nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to use the Q&A function or the raise hand function to share any stories or ask any questions. Thank you, Bill, for all these incredible photos. It's amazing too that these are all recent too, because you just traveled there. One question was, well, actually, while we're here on the sensitive plant, why does it react like that?
Well, I think it's for to protect itself from herbivores. As our herbivores walking through the area and feed it, it sort of closes up like it's not there, or like you don't want to eat me because this is only dead. So I think
Right.
but it isn't amazing that plants can respond that quickly to stimuli.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I thought of like a Venus flytrap where like the pressure inside or whatever,
Mhm.
however it happens that makes it close. But
Yeah,
I
a
thought
Venus
of this.
flytrap typically it's sticky inside, and so it doesn't typically doesn't close really quickly, but it closes gradually. But
Right.
these close in you know 2 seconds or less. From
It's really
going from
interesting.
here to there is 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So,
So
fascinating.
yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that came in so far was, when did you make this trip? Was it winter?
This is, as I remember, it was November. Well, I actually went down, I think it was on October 31st, and it was a 10-day trip. So it was basically in November. And if folks are thinking about, look, Costa Rica is good any time of year, anytime. If you want to go to in July, well, then you'd see all the permanent residents that are in Costa Rica. So you wouldn't be seeing the variety of birds that you would be, say, during the North American winter. Which, if you have seen a lot of birds in North America, maybe you just want to focus on the permanent residents. But if you go in, say, November, then you get to see not only the permanent residents, but a lot of the neotropical migrants, the birds, the warblers, the vireos, the flycatchers that have migrated out of North America and overwintering in Costa Rica. So that might be interesting. If you wanted to go a little earlier, like in September, you would get the permanent residents. You'd get some of the early North American migrants that are just migrating and staying in Costa Rica, for example. But you'd also be getting some of those what we call passage migrants, those that are migrating out of North America or passing through Costa Rica to South America. Okay, so they're only there for a very brief period of time during the fall, and then again in the spring as they're moving back to the North American breeding grounds. But to me, whenever you can go, do it.
I was gonna ask, if, oh, actually somebody has their hand raised. So John, you should be able to unmute yourself.
So we went to Costa Rica actually on our honeymoon at the end of 1999. So it's coming up on 25 years ago. And we traveled from, well, San Jose up to Arenal, had to see a volcano, and a cloud forest area, not Monteverde, but the another one. But in terms of lowland areas, we we stayed for a while at the Corcovado tent camp, right in Corcovado National Park,
Mhm.
and then went to Lapa Rios, which is on the Osa Peninsula, the southern peninsula.
Yes. Mhm.
And in the cloud forest, we saw, resplendent quetzal. It's been a long time, so I don't recall a lot of the smaller birds we saw. Well, I do recall there that at the lodge, they had hummingbird feeders, and it
Yeah.
was incredible the number and variety of hummingbirds around those feeders. Um, and then when we went south, I mean, we were Corcovado tent camp. It's amazing. You're right on the ocean, sleeping in platform tents. The Pacific Ocean, just beautiful. Scarlet macaws everywhere, flying in and out. Iguanas coming through the camp on the ground.
Jaguarundi.
Yeah, my wife saw a jaguarundi, which is a small cat, going into the rainforest there at Corcovado. That was quite a sighting, unusual sighting. Then the Osa Peninsula, at La Rios, we did a number of rainforest hikes, and I think there are 4 different kinds of monkeys in that area. I remember howler monkeys and spider monkeys. I don't remember the other.
Sure. Capuchin, probably.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And again, lots of macaws and lots of toucans. Toucans were all over the place.
Yeah.
Almost like a trash bird. There were so many of them. But we saw sloths. There's a beautiful, the dining area has a large deck, and they usually have a spotting scope on a tripod there for you to look out. I remember one morning on our deck, I watched a Scarlet Macaw flying from off in the distance, from right to left, and calling as it went, and then it turned around and it came back, and its mate was with it. So it had called its mate, and they flew back in the other direction.
Yeah.
And that was really quite a sight. But
Well, John, you definitely had an itinerary that was. You had some highland birds. You had Pacific Coast, lowlands, and yeah, the Osa Peninsula is one of those areas that's, for a lot of folks, is somewhat hard to get to, but it's certainly worth the effort. And I've been to Costa Rica many times, and to Panama, and Jaguarundi. I mean, that's not fair, because I've never seen one. And
Yeah.
But that's well. Thank you for sharing your. I hope these photographs brought some memories back for you.
definitely, I think I'm muted now, but
No, you're still on.
yeah, definitely great presentation. Look forward to the presentation on Monday.
Okay, look forward to seeing you then.
All right.
Okay.
I'm just gonna remove.
So, any other questions?
Yeah, there was just one last one that we can have. It said that this person said you came out early in the morning at the lodge, saw the birds. How about middle of the day? Did you see as
Yeah,
many?
well, I tend to be hyperactive, and so for me to sit down is not very comfortable. So whenever there was a break, I'd just wander off and see what I could find, And so, this happens to be again a Rhodes Scholar trip that I went. All the other trips, the other 10 or so times, I was leading a group from Massachusetts. This time I decided I'd go as a participant, so I didn't have to worry about all the logistics and everything. And I was going with some friends, so that made it nice. But usually on these trips, you do have some free time that if you want to rest, I sort of figure it this way: when I'm dead, I'm going to rest for a long time. So I'm not, and I'd like to try to so I'd like to get out and be able to wander by myself and do photography. And that's what I did a lot of this time would be, I would either sometimes not eat a meal just so that I could wander for another hour. And it seems to have worked out okay.
Well, thank you, Bill, for this wonderful event. And just as a reminder, Bill will be back to share part 2 of his journey through Costa Rica on Monday at 7 p.m. You can sign up on carylibrary.org if you're not already. But thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your photos.
My
with
pleasure,
us.
Matt. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Have a good night, everyone.